Hi, and welcome to the predictions based on astrology for the week of February 3rd, 2020. First, let's quickly go over just some highlights for predictions that I made for previous week. I think my predictions for the stock market direction were correct for 4 out of 5 days, which the main, prediction was that on Monday there would be a big drop, and I suppose it would not have been that surprising to make that prediction the previous week. However, my prediction was actually in place already on my blog at lsunka.com back on, January 13th of 2020. And the incorrect day was that I thought that maybe the market will not start turning up until the earliest, maybe the Tuesday afternoon, but it actually went back down and reversed already to up starting Tuesday morning. So let's see, some other events I think I have already mentioned last week, so I'm not going to repeat them too much, is this ongoing conjunction between Pluto and Saturn often results in a variety of serious events, geopolitical tensions, major earthquakes, and also collapses of large, buildings, old buildings, or tunnels, or some events that perhaps occur underground. Because again, Saturn, being Capricorn especially, has to do with things that have to do with like soil, metals, minerals, digging, construction of large-scale, projects, etc. And so we did have, of course, also a death of important leaders and just reshuffling of the, power in governments, etc. And of course, we had, as I mentioned last week already, deaths of important leaders, including, of course, Kobe Bryant. We had that one on 26th of January. And we also had, of course, the noteworthy event, even though it was years in the making, is that finally we had, Brexit was finalized. So even though this was in the making for several years, it's actually when Saturn and Pluto became really kind of the conjunction between the two became really precise, is when the event was actually finally able to, finalize or reach completion. We also had some news, not that the buildings don't collapse, on a daily basis, I'm sure, all over the world, here and there, but just something that happens to be in the news. I did see there was a large concert hall in St. Petersburg, Russia that collapsed. It was pretty a spectacular collapse. Unfortunately, a person had died, but that's something that made it into the news. Let's see. I haven't seen super major earthquakes last week, but we do have, of course, ongoing, coronavirus outbreak, and I did make predictions for that with respect for this being important news for the US. That was for January 30th, 31st, that in the US there would be increased focus on Neptunian type influences, which is oil, gas, navy, as well as pharmaceuticals, chemicals, drugs, etc. And indeed we had on the 30th an update that almost 200 US citizens were placed in isolation, and public health emergency was declared by WHO right around that time. And one prediction also made that I didn't really think that came through, at least not as of yet, for US, is that between January 13th and February 2nd, I guess that would be already over by now, that there will be perhaps some negative news for transportation and communication companies. I didn't see anything as far as earnings. If anything, several companies like Microsoft and Tesla actually reported high earnings, and their stocks, went up nicely. At the same time, for companies that specifically have ties to China, those indeed may experience problems due to issues, if they have manufacturing base in China, or perhaps their, consumers are in China. So those, of course we have Apple, for example, and they had to close all the Apple stores. So for those companies, the news would be negative, and it does fall within this time frame, but it, of course, will continue if this outbreak in China continues to cause problems. Let's see, and of course, for China had made predictions, and this continues into this week, that there will be focus on problems with indeed the healthcare, as well as various secrets or secretive activities, or focus on sort of places of isolation such as prisons, hospitals, etc. And of course, we did have news about them building these temporary, I'm not sure if they're temporary, but those large hospitals to take care of the number of cases that they're having with this new coronavirus infection. So let's see. So on to the news for this week. We will continue having, and this will be through 2020, this ongoing background influence with Saturn and Pluto still being very close to each other, and this again will continue manifest as greater than usual probability of strong earthquakes. In particularly, it will be sort of intensifying again from about end of February into early April, especially at the very end of March, so like March 29, 30, 31st. And this week, the worst days, I guess, for this influence would be February 3 through 5. And of course, we may have other issues, increased probability of accidents, violent terrorist attacks, important leaders dying, or just reshuffling in the leadership of either governments or corporations. And of course, we have that ongoing. We had some news about stabbing in, London, etc. Of course, that's not necessarily, I wouldn't say that this would be associated with specifically Saturn and Pluto, but this is just a background influence that kind of makes these times a little bit more stressful than during other times. And one thing I guess I forgot, in China, there was news about some sort of a outbreak of bird flu where they had to kill some chickens as well. So, but that's just for China. They're also going through the slow transit of Pluto through their 12th house, conjuncting their Jupiter. So that will continue through 2020 for China. So they will continue experiencing some problems again associated with either healthcare or say Navy, oil, etc. But this may also result in improving basically businesses or services in those sectors as well. So another weekly influence for US and or oil is that from about February 1st through the 12th, especially for February 3 through 5, 7, and 9, there may be increased tensions for US when it comes to negotiating, say, agreements with their international partners. There may be increased probability, or there is increased probability of either these tensions becoming kind of leading to some more aggressive negotiations, or something that necessitates the use of military, or there may be just accidents, explosions, fires, and these may involve oil, Navy, some sort of chemicals, poisons. So it could be something like an attack on a Navy ship, or just an accident involving a vessel of some sort, accident on an oil rig, burning of oil or chemicals. So some sort of manufacturing facility that manufactures some chemicals may catch fire or something like that. And of course, when it comes to news about the epidemic in the US, especially on the February 3rd through 5th, there might be increased sort of news about this, and or news about just either flu or some sort of infection, something that basically combines either wet surfaces, mucus, and inflammation, and or it could be increased news about various medicines that are delivered through basically spray or liquids, and somehow are again administered to basically take care of fever or reduce the temperature or stop the inflammation. At the same time, if there are some sort of more aggressive measures announced, be it use of military or some sort of aggressive actions to make things faster, or even address try to stop the epidemic from spreading again through some sort of aggressive measures, at this time they may not be very successful, or if there's like an attack or move, of military forces, something may kind of go not as planned, just because there may be some confusion as to what is the exact cause, or what is the exact, course of action, where should be the course of action, or where should, the action be directed towards. Because right now, again, the time may be such that it may be confusing, or the actions may be too sort of hasty, or too much force may be applied, and it actually may lead to the unexpected results, and the true problem may still remain obscured and not really addressed. There may also be some problems, especially on February 3rd and 4th, that involve either sports, racing, professional fighting, accidents, fires, and military. And those may involve some sort of dangerous situations, and or airborne objects, air or high winds. So perhaps maybe fires is started because of high winds, airplane accidents, infection that's spreading through the air. Military aircraft is, needs to be scrambled to respond to some urgent situation. Something that involves this fast response. But I guess, as I said before, it may not be. It may not lead to the expected result, because again, like something is scrambled to address, flying object of some sort is trying to reach its target, but the target is elusive, or there's some confusion in communication, and it results in basically missed target, or things basically not going as planned. So let's see, for China, January 30th through February 10th, especially February, again, 3rd through 5th, those are the key dates, I suppose, this week. There may be increased, again, news about like secretive activities, of course, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, epidemics, mining, excavation, soil, recycling, nuclear power, as well as topics like insurance, loans, debt, stock market. And of course, there was on Monday news, that the stock market in China dropped 8%. After markets open after the Lunar Year celebration, and at this time there may also be some initiatives in China where there may be a desire to expand the regulation of like travel, shipment, or take care of situations that are maybe confusing or involve some deception, or implement kind of more chemicals, or deal with pollution. Or perhaps somehow, again, news about poisons, drugs, as well as oil, gas, navy, beverages, etc., prisons, or like I said, places of isolation may be kind of featured prominently in the news. But the news, again, they may not be providing clear information. Again, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, this sort of expansion is not necessarily of the news of this sort, is not going to lead to sort of improved clarity. And there may be increased death toll, which of course, I guess you don't need astrology to sort of predict that. But again, right now, especially early in this week, there might be kind of a focus on using more drugs, more hospitals, putting more people in quarantine. It's just the focus on expanding, either controls or expanding the usage of drugs, chemicals, healthcare facilities, etc. However, again, as I said, I think already last week, this may not necessarily be helpful. This, control of travel, or even bringing more healthcare workers, building more facilities, because again, something is missing, and either the real cause is not being addressed, or the approach, maybe say regulating travel is such that, it's just not effective enough, because it's either too generic, or it's just kind of applied sort of incorrectly, and is not quite as effective as desired at this time. There may also be increased news about excessively wet weather causing problems with communication and transportation. And finally, ongoing influence for China for coronavirus outbreak. I looked at the transits to the China's horoscope for the upcoming year, and basically, indeed, it doesn't indicate, and I think I already mentioned a couple of years ago actually, that for China, 2018 through 2020 is a time where there may be some reforms in their healthcare systems, as well as sort of improvements after perhaps things going downhill first, or old things really being just cut out of existence or dying really, in the area of, again, hospitals, prisons, religion, Navy, oil, anything that has to do with secretive research and biomedical area, etc., chemicals, poisons, even beverages, movies as well. And for specifically 2020, this influence is kind of going to be even stronger than in the two previous years, and sort of will be culminating. But again, first, old approach or old problems will need to be addressed before things can get better. So it could be also pollution, could be this epidemic, could also be, Navy related topics. So, but things may first, like I said, become problem. Then when the problem is addressed and reform sort of is implemented, things may actually improve dramatically for a long time. And for this year, we may still see escalation of these developments related to specifically coronavirus outbreak, and the more intense times will actually, I think, still come between sometime August and November of 2020. And in particular, I would pay attention to March 17th through 22nd, July 11th and 12th, and then around November 9th and 13th would be significant times where something may be announced. And it could also be a peak of, say, news about some, wave of, say, deaths or some findings. And in between those periods that I just mentioned, there may be news about things kind of slowing down or improving, or something being addressed. But then again, like I said, not until sometime November of 2020 is when I think things will turn sort of permanently for the better. So as far as the specific days of the week and the market direction, I think February 3rd we'll see market going up, sort of a rebounding, of course, after the Friday's drop. And indeed, I'm recording this already on the 3rd. I've seen that the market did go up. For China, I expect on Monday that there will be increased focus on international partnerships and agreements, and especially those involving AI, aerospace, IT, solar power, military and sports. And there may be some action initiated by China, either a new leader or some new project that will aim to somehow benefit China's interests, but perhaps at the expense or in opposition of what their partners might want to see. Or even it might involve mobilizing military in some way, but something that China will try to do proactively to improve, like I said, these areas like AI, aerospace, even solar power, but it may be sort of somewhat selfish and oriented towards what's good for China, even though it may upset its partners. I haven't seen it actually in the news as of today, but I'm not looking through every single headline, so it's possible that I just missed something. On Tuesday, I think market may actually go down, and US February 4th and 5th seem like significant dates. And as I mentioned before, there may be but focus on, like, again, of course, epidemic, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, but also poisons, chemicals, Navy, etc. But there may also be minor sort of positive news actually for workforce, or about workforce, governmental services, healthcare, and governmental contracts. So it could be something along the lines that maybe if there's a union of some sort demanding some concessions, or some workers of some large companies are asking for increase in benefits, so that may be provided to them, and or there may be some regulation implemented where workers, especially service type workers like maybe nurses or teachers or policemen, policewomen, will receive additional benefits, or some sort of better healthcare or better treatment. There may also be positive news for sales of the healthcare related sort of devices and businesses, and or even the healthcare itself. There's some sort of services may improve. For the 5th, Wednesday, I think the market will go down as well. For China, February 5th and 6th may see increased focus on international partnerships and agreements, and especially those that involve like solar power, nuclear power, military partnerships, as well as recycling, mining, storage, say, at underground locations, as well as anything that to do with secrets, spying, death, as well as debt, loan, and rates. China may initiate some actions that again aim to benefit China in one or more of these areas, but it may lead to sort of upset among its partners. And this could be something like they're starting some new process, some new task, appointing a new leader, engaging in some manipulations, especially financial manipulations, or even spying, or perhaps they may be a target of such activities. The 6th Thursday, I think, market, there's a slight chance that the market may go up, mostly because things don't look as bad as I guess on other dates. And then for US, there will be probability, increased probability of some minor positive news about immigration, international agreements, legal agreements of any sort, long-distance transportation, and higher education. This may involve just kind of things going more smoothly, and something is being allowed to unfold. So, for example, if they're international students, maybe their visas are granted more easily, or they're sort of moving. It becomes easier for them to travel internationally in and out, or it's easier for U.S. citizens to travel internationally, and or there's some announcement about U.S. leadership that again will involve some sort of legal status, especially actually this may involve women, female leaders. There may also be some improvement in, say, communicating about someone's legal status, which again helps to improve either getting visas or immigration, or just expedited screening when people travel across the border. So it can be actually positive in that sense for the US. And finally, on Friday, I think the market may go down, and 7th and 8th of February for the US may see increased news about country's leadership, country status in the world, as well as domestic security and safety issues. So things like, food safety or bank stability, or sort of, how much savings banks have. Again, do they have cash on hand, or do they have, assets, etc. And there may be some upset where it will be perhaps seen as some leaders' actions are kind of more focused on improving maybe U.S. status in the world. However, they at the same time jeopardize homeland security. So there may be concerns that whatever the actions that are taken, like I said, that they may be good for improving sort of U.S. status as a world power, but at the same time they're sort of forgetting or minimizing or even jeopardizing, the situation at home somehow. And just to kind of provide a glance ahead, I guess, for the upcoming months, as I mentioned, end of March, but it could be starting as early as end of February to early April, but end of March in particular, especially maybe this 22nd through 31st, may see strong earthquakes, accidents, maybe even attacks, or increased number of attacks, or attacks maybe more serious, maybe volcanic eruptions, some buildings may collapse, and again, obviously some buildings may collapse somewhere, but something that makes it to the news where it's a really large building, or it's an important building, or perhaps there's an attack and therefore building collapses. There may also be increased geopolitical tensions, even including military threats, protests, again, violent protests, problems with, airspace, maybe some sort of cyber attacks, power outages, and things like that. And then also in June 8th through 15th may be time where we will see sort of another either follow-up activities or another wave of activities that will be reminiscent of those that occurred on the January 25th through 28th, and most likely they will involve again healthcare, pharmaceuticals, either again sort of information, but news about either this coronavirus outbreak or just some other outbreak, something like cholera or dysentery, something along the lines of some inflammation or fever, or something that's being transmitted through basically dirty, wet kind of contaminated surfaces. And there may also be increased news just in general about chemicals, drugs, oil, gas, as well as health facilities, prisons, quarantine, things like that. And it may also be associated, especially June 9th through the 12th. At the same time, we may expect, of course, news about oil prices, but also major stock market moves, probably a drop, and potentially also stressful news for like oil, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, etc. So I guess that wraps it up. And I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you guys later. And otherwise, have a great week. Stay safe there. Bye.